fastest growing podcast in the history of the known universe. Got a lot of fun for you today because basically the last full weekend of NFL and next week is going to be great because it's conference championship games. But this is a part of the year I get depressed because football's over. We don't have college. We've got a few games left, and now that the Texans are dead, it kind of takes some of the fun out of it. But we're going to have a fun show for you today. We're going to break down all the games. We'll talk about a few other things that pop up because they always do. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I want to thank everyone who contributed to Venmo last week when I told the story about what happened with the lawsuit. And just to update you on that, today I was supposed to get my account unfrozen, but they still haven't done it because the lawyer for the bank had other things to do today. And, he's getting paid a bunch of money to turn on a button. It's ridiculous. And look, I know this is my fault. I should have known I was getting sued. I should have, found out somehow. But now it's just ridiculous. So spent most of the weekend at home hanging out with friends that came over and brought some food and alcohol. Got a couple of bottles of Eagle Rare out of it. So always a good time. And watched a lot of sport. That was basically it. So I can't thank you guys enough for helping out. And, hopefully we're going to get past this. And, the podcast is going to be here unless I die, which, we'll see. Welcome in, said boss. And, it says they have to have proof they severed you. No, serve me. Yeah, they had nothing. I can't even get a copy of the friggin' lawsuit, man. It's ridiculous. But I'll get it worked out. That's life. Sometimes we have to deal with these things. And, and I will just tell you, Mr. Life or Mrs. Life, whichever one you are, keep throwing them at me. Because I'm just going to keep catching them and throwing them back in your face, But first, before we get started, I want to tell you about Midtown Bar and Grill, which is usually where I'd be on Monday. Great place, 415 West Gray. Roger's in the house. Welcome. Terrific food. Doing a lot of cool stuff with Tommy. And he runs the place. You'll always see him there. Great staff. It's a cool place to hang out. And, that was where I would always take a first date. And it's like, if they don't like Midtown Bar and Grill, they're out. And, that's how I judge things, right? It's like, oh, we're going to go hang out at PJ's. Well, if you don't like this, you're out. There's a reason that I don't have a very good dating record, I guess. But these places are awesome. So go check out Midtown Bar and Grill on West Gray. Say hello to Tommy. Tell him Fred said hello. A lot of weather in the area today, so I didn't really want to take a chance and get out there. But welcome in Pelly Rat and Sed's Lions won. I was rooting for the Lions yesterday. I'm not going to lie. One of my best friends, Brent, is a huge Lions fan. And one of my other really good friends, one of the UH legendary track guys that hangs out with me at PJ's, Michael's also a big Lions fan. So I was happy for them and enjoyed that. But let's welcome in Mafia Joe Spano, my man. What is going on?
What's up, Gunda? How we doing today?
I'm alive. That's the goal each day right now. Stay alive. But yeah.
What do we always say, Freddie? You think you wake up, you take the mirror, you put it under your nose, if it fogs up, it's like, all right, let me get up and start the day. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, then I'm like, when did I become a vampire? When did this happen? Did somebody sneak in the middle of the night? So B. Hannon, Flip, welcome all you guys. No, so things are pretty good. And actually, just as an update, I've been applying for some part-time online work just to get through this until we get the movie deal done and the other stuff that's just dragging. And looks like I have a job, which I will talk about on Thursday because I think you guys will get a good laugh out of it. But I just got to send them all the paperwork tonight, and it's decent enough money. So between that and this, and like I said, my pension kicks in March 1st. Everything's going to be fine until we can get our big deals done. So it's just like anything else, man. You have setbacks, you have victories. More setbacks and victories over the last year and a half, but you know what? Hey, the Texans bounced back from 13-1. I can bounce back from this. And let's start with that, Joe. Let's start with the Texans and the Ravens. I saw a lot of, really good season. Everybody's happy. Pat them on the back. I'm kind of the opposite of that. I'm like, you get to that point, then you're not guaranteed next year. Nobody's
Nope.
guaranteed anything next year. I mean, unless you're, the Chiefs and the Bills and the 49ers and you're there every single year, but you're not guaranteed anything. And I think they'll be a better team next year. But I thought that they, and in all fairness, they ran into the best team in football. I mean, the Ravens are the most complete team, offensively and defensively. And they were going to need the Ravens to play a bad game, and the Texans were going to have to play out of their mind, and neither thing happened.
Well, you look at this game, and let's give the Texans a lot of credit. They hung tough with the most complete and balanced team in football in their building for 30 minutes in elements that the Texans aren't used to. For 30 minutes, that was a hell of a football game. And the Texans were there, hammer and tong. They didn't play great, but they were right there. The second half, they got ran over. That's the reality. The second half, they just got beat by a more complete and better football team. And I don't like to get too wrapped up in the home field advantage because it's diminished over the years in the National Football League. But when you have a Southern team that plays in a conference with all Southern teams, either it's climate controlled or it's comfortable outdoors, and then you take them in the Northeast during a cold snap, it's a hell of an adjustment and it's a big disadvantage. So give the Texans credit. They had the big special teams return, the punt return. That was huge, and that helped keep them in it in the first half. But they hung tough, and for 30 minutes, they were giving the Ravens everything they wanted. In the second half, the Ravens took over and showed why they're the most complete, most balanced, and probably best team in the NFL right now. But if you're a Texans fan, as you said, nothing is guaranteed. Next year is not guaranteed. But you've got plenty of draft picks, plenty of cap space. You can identify your weaknesses. They don't have many, but they have some. And you can go judiciously spend in free agency smartly and draft smartly and fortify this football team, which, as we've talked about recently every time I've been on, I really do think the Texans are on the come, and I think they're going to be one of the elite teams in the National Football League for years to come. They have elite coaching, and as Lady Luck would have it, they picked number 2, and they ended up getting a stud quarterback that's going to be a superstar for better than a decade in this league. And they have a stud left tackle and a stud pass rusher. And a stud corner. They have all the building blocks that you need to win big in this league for a long time. And they have now the wherewithal to fill in all the other pieces. They are going to be dangerous and good for a very, very long time.
Well, I think the lack of weapons kind of showed on Saturday. And when I look at this team, I see that the offensive line at some point, Kenyon Green has to be a player, and he should be back next year. And I think they're good enough on the offensive line, but I think they need another running back. As much as Singletary did a nice job for him, they just don't have any depth there, and I'd like to see them, get somebody in the draft, and that's something I always advocate is drafting a running back every year, and then trying to get one that can become a big player for you. So I think they need help there. I'd like to see a more reliable tight end than Dalton Schultz. I think he was fine, but at some point you'd like to see a guy who catches the ball and doesn't drop it 1 out of every 3. And they need another receiver, and I think whether that becomes John Mechie, who I don't know if he's ever going to recover from the knee injury and the leukemia and everything else. He shows some flashes, but maybe next year is his breakout year. But Nico Collins is a stud. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around Mike Evans coming here, which I think if you put him on the other side of Nico and had a healthy Tank Dell in the slot, you've got all the weapons you need at receiver. And you'll be a much better offensive team. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think they've, they're going to have to sign Jonathan Grenard. He's, a pretty solid pass rusher for him. I'd like to see another thumping safety back there. I mean, they had injuries at safety all year, but I think they need one more impact player. And I don't know where it needs to be on defense. And can you do all that in one off season? Well, if you go free agency, you probably can. And they've got money to spend. So I think if you look at, those are the things I look at and say, if you could just get better here, and then you're going to have some internal improvement from all these young guys, right? I mean,
Sure.
Stingley's going to get better. Anderson's going to get better.
Christian Harris is going to continue to grow. What a player he's becoming.
Yeah, and he's a guy who can actually tackle and cover guys. I mean, those are rare at linebacker. So, he's not a great cover guy, but he doesn't suck at it. And, I think that's the thing. Those guys all with some internal improvement, put another couple veterans next to them that can play. They did a good job of picking up guys last year. And I think this division is there to be taken if they can make those moves and if they can improve internally and go out and get some free agents and then have another good draft.
And I think it's there for them because, as we've discussed, when you look at it, the stuff they need to get and need to add from the outside is stuff are pieces that are relatively affordable. You have the stud left tackle. Those are incredibly hard to get, incredibly expensive. You've got the stud quarterback. They're incredibly hard to get and expensive once you got to pay them. You've got the lockdown starting stud outside corner. They're hard to get and really expensive once you have to pay them. You've got the stud number one pass rushing defender. They're really hard to get and really expensive when you have to pay them. Notice a pattern here. All the other stuff they have the cornerstone number one receiver, Nico Collins. So all the stuff that's really hard to find and really expensive to go shopping for in free agency, they've got. They can go upgrade in these other places with very solid red chip players that will come at affordable prices. The running back that you mentioned adding that fits what they want to do better than Dameon Pierce as the second running back. That guy will come in the mid rounds, second round, third round, fourth round, whatever it is. They'll add a safety. Maybe they go get one in free agency, as you said, but they'll also add one in the draft. So I think the blueprint is there. They've done the hardest parts. Now the rest of the build is kind of easy, and you can see a path to it with the amount of money they have available under the salary cap available for free agency, and with the bevy of draft picks that they have. I think they're well set up for an excellent, excellent future.
Said Boss asked one that you can comment on as well. How about Barkley to the Texans? I am not a fan of signing veteran running backs. That's just me. That's my philosophy. My philosophy is you draft one every year in the second or third or fourth round, and you'll hit on one. And when you do, you've got that guy under contract. You don't draft him high. But, you look at the great backs that were drafted in the second round, the Derrick Henrys, the Dalvin Cooks. There's been a bunch of them.
Nick Chubb.
Nick Chubb. You get 3 or 4 years out of those guys before they break, and you're not paying them for what they did for somebody else. So your thought on Barkley?
No, I wouldn't spend the money it's going to take. He's still young enough that there's going to be production. And while I was all for the Giants drafting him at the time because I really believed he was going to be a generational running back, he's an excellent running back. Top 10, top 12 running back in the league, but he's not a generational back. You're going to have to pay him. Now, he may not get what he wants, but you're probably going to end up having to pay him more than he's worth. When you look at a Saquon Barkley, he's going to get dinged up and he's going to miss 2 to 4 games, and he's going to have some sort of problem there. You also look, he's a very boom or bust back. He can make a lot of explosive plays, but he does an awful lot. There's too many negative plays, and an awful lot of his run chart is 1-1, -3, 1-1, -3, 1, 60. So sometimes the numbers are better than what he does for in a down in, down out basis. He's not as good he's not as big a factor and as good a receiver as we thought he was coming out of Penn State. So while he's very, very good, I don't think he's that truly great foundational back. And I know the market for running backs is depressed, but Saquon Barkley is going to want a considerable amount of money, and there is some team that's going to sign him. I wouldn't do it because I don't think it'll quite be money well spent.
Yeah, I think he'll wind up going someplace high profile like Dallas or something like that and get overpaid.
A team that believes that they're a running back away and that they have to do that. And I think that it'll end up going down as a bad contract because by 29, that is a guy who the wheels are going to fall off of. There's a torn ACL. There's countless high ankle sprains now. So there's all this tread that's been worn off the tire. There just ain't much left. By 29, he's going to be a shell of himself. So I wouldn't have to want to be stuck on 3 years of Saquon Barkley.
Well, and that's kind of what the Cowboys did to Zeke Elliott. I mean, they ran him so much. They're the only guy who's been able to handle that kind of load and not break down has been Derrick Henry, and even he's slowing down a little bit now. And
Right.
Said mentions I think Gibbs with the Lions will last longer with the two-back style. Maybe, although boy, they started using him a lot more late in the year, and I like Jamar Gibbs, but that's another guy I just would not have invested that high of a pick in. Bijan Robinson, as much as I like him, would not have invested that high of a pick. Those are guys, if I get them in the second round, I'm spanking the monkey. Not in public, but, in the privacy of my own bathroom. But in the first round, no, they're not for me. But that's just my philosophy, and it has been since you guys have known me.
And again, I'm not always adverse to taking a running back in the first round. I won't rule it out, but the realities are you feel a lot better about it taking them at 9, 12, 14, 16, 23 than you do at 2. And, in this day and age, a running back has to be a part of some type of committee. I don't think you can do what you used to do to a running back where you run him 25 times a game for 17 games for as many years as because the tread falls off the tire very quickly. And it looks like the way it's going in the NFL is you have 2 real good backs and you split that workload fairly evenly so that both are fresh late in the year.
And one of them's going to get hurt because they always do. So,
Right.
But I mean, I think looking ahead, I think the offensive line, if they were wrong on Kenyon Green, then okay. But he's been injured his first 2 years. I think year 3 has to be his breakout. So you got Tunsil and Green, and I think Scruggs is going to be a fine center. I guess you bring back Fat Shaq for the other guard position, and a healthy Titus Howard. You've got the makings of a really good offensive line, and George Fant is a very good swing tackle if you bring him back. So, and with injuries, you always get injuries in the line. So, I think they're good there. I think another impact receiver and an impact running back, and we're talking about a completely different offense going into next year, and they were pretty good this year.
I think the biggest challenge to that offense may be keeping Bobby Slowick. First year as a play caller, and I'm already hearing rumblings that he's head coach material. So, I mean, and now that they've gotten eliminated, he's going to get interviews. He's going to get looks. I think he'll be back next year, but I think after next year, he's probably gone onto greener pastures and a head coaching gig.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think, he and D'Amico are pretty close, and D'Amico did the smart thing last year and said, you know what? I need another year. And it worked out. Got another year as DC, and then he got the job he wanted. And right now, if you're Bobby Slowick and it's like the best you're going to do is the Panthers, maybe wait a year. Gamble on yourself a little bit. Welcome in, Lamont. Always a pleasure. Virginia Buttonweed's here. But yeah, I think so. And that happens when you have success. There's erosion on your coaching staff. There always is. But he's going to get some interviews. I think he's a cycle behind. I do think it's next cycle, but he's going to have another big year, and that depends on CJ and everything else. And we talked at the top of the show. You're not guaranteed anything next year. I mean, if
Right.
CJ comes out game one and shatters his knee, and this isn't a playoff team.
Right. No.
And it doesn't matter what you do, because if you trot Davis Mills out there, you're winning 4 games again.
Didn't we see that for a half this year, and we saw the results?
Yeah.
Here, a different football team.
They did get the 1 win with Case, which was good, but you can't expect to win more than 1 out of 3 or 4 with cats like that playing quarterback.
Exactly. Quality backups, but if they have to start long term, you're in trouble.
All right, let's turn our attention a little bit to the Ravens, who I've been saying all along, I think they're the most complete team in football, offensively and defensively. They didn't even need Mark Andrews on Saturday. And that defense, I don't think gets enough credit. I just think they have – I'll take their defense over the Browns right now, and, you could have the Browns in the field. So –
yeah. No, the Ravens defense is tremendous. They can get after the quarterback. They can stop the run. They can defend on the back line. And, they did that without Marlon Humphrey, who was out for the game. And then Ronald Darby got hurt in the game, and they were down to Rocky Ya-Sin at that right cornerback spot for chunks of the game. And they still locked things up. This is an incredible defense on all 3 levels. Hopefully for them, they get Humphrey back for the AFC Championship game, because that will be a shot in the arm to this defense. And offensively, we've talked about all the elements that they have. They have a good enough stable of receivers led by Zay Flowers. You mentioned Mark Andrews, who looks like he should be back for the AFC Championship game. And in his absence, look at the emergence of Isaiah Likely. He's become a really, really good tight end. And can you imagine what this offense would be had Keaton Mitchell not torn his ACL? That kid is a home run waiting to happen every time he touches the football.
Yeah, and a really good offensive line on top of that. And Virginia Buttonweed said, how'd Stroud do against the Falcons and Panthers? We talked about this last week. This was a team that had to learn from stuff like that. They'll learn from this too. Against the Falcons and Panthers, yes, they lost the games, but we were still thinking they were a 4 or 5 win team at that point. But they got better, and they learned from that, and look at how they finished games at the end of the season. They just ran into a better team. I mean, the Ravens are 2 years ahead of the Texans at least right now. And, yeah, what you missed was, and what I said was, for them to have any chance, the Ravens are going to have to play their worst game, like they did against the Browns, by the way, and the Texans were going to have to play out of their minds. Neither thing happened. So, it's one of those things where I'd like to sit here and pat them on the head and say, cute job, guys, you surprised us. But the reality is you don't get many chances to get this far. And so when you do, you'd like to perform better than that. And they didn't. I mean, they were extremely disappointing.
Let's be honest. They hung tough for a half, but they made a lot more mistakes in that football game than they made in the wild card round against the Browns, where they played really disciplined and tight football. A lot more penalties, a lot more execution mistakes for the Texans against the best team, against possibly the best team in football, which they just couldn't afford to do.
Well, and just like we were talking about with Stroud having to learn to win on the road, which he started figuring out late in the season, with those losses to the Falcons and Panthers, but he's going to have to figure out how to win a road playoff game against a really good team, and that was the difference, because they didn't show me. I love Lamont says Bobby Slowick scored 3 points Saturday, but has at least 5 interviews winning. Yeah, I think that's hilarious. I think this interview round for him is about preparing for next year's interviews.
That's fair.
I mean, But we'll see. I mean, if he winds up going somewhere, I have faith that D'Amico will find somebody just as good. I mean, nobody had heard of Bobby Slowick before D'Amico came here. But one team that I think they were comparable to the Texans late in the season because they had to win out pretty much. And they did go in and perform, and they did show some promise. And I'm talking about the Packers going in against San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, down the stretches, if you look, it was really a tale of two seasons for the Green Bay Packers. Early in the year, yeah, they won a few games, but I mean, it was nothing impressive early. And when you looked at them offensively early in the year, they could sustain nothing. As ordinary as the numbers were in the first half of the season offensively, they weren't even as good as those numbers because it was all their performance offensively was big plays. It was chunk plays, big plays, explosives. There was no consistency down to down offensively, from the Green Bay Packers and from Jordan Love. He grew in the second half of the season tremendously, and he looks like a franchise. He's looked like a franchise quarterback over the last half of the season. The Green Bay Packers offense was a very, very good offense, was an elite offense the second half, and particularly the last third of the season, where it wasn't just explosive plays. There were plenty of those, but they were able to sustain things. Once they got Aaron Jones healthy and Jordan Love took the next steps in his evolution, they were very, very impressive on offense. And I think they surprised many of us. They surprised me by beating Dallas. I thought they'd give Dallas a hard time, but they surprised me by beating Dallas. And they surprised me even more by giving the 49ers the challenge that they did. Again, the Packers are another team on the come because the quarterback certainly looks like he's grown and is for real.
Yeah, and I'm not a big Jordan Love guy, but he played really well down the second half, and frankly, they should have won that football game. And I want to get back to this, but I want to address something Lamont said. It was impossible to ask the Texans defense to hold it down while the offense shit the bed. The defense did the offense no favors, and we see that all the time, man. You look up and you see, wow, the defense gave up 34 points. Well, they were gassed in the second half because they were on the field so much.
Right.
Against a big, strong offensive line. And we see that a lot in football, and it never really gets brought up, which is why I'm glad Lamont brought it up, that, a lot of that's on the offense. You've got to possess the ball. You've got to give your guys a break. And they just weren't good yesterday. But getting back to the Packers, I will say this about the 49ers. I think that offense completely depends on a healthy Deebo Samuel. Because they were not nearly as good without him. And look, McCaffrey's nice. Ayuk's a nice player. Obviously, George Kittle's a nice player. Brock Purdy does what he does. But Deebo Samuel is the guy that makes everything else work for the 49ers.
It's hard to disagree. And I'll ask this. Brock Purdy is a great story. But, and I might be in the minority here, but I've been one that has made the statement that Brock Purdy is a little overrated. He is the beneficiary of a great system and a rash of dominant weapons, a dominant defense to support him. And, I've watched a lot of Brock Purdy, and I've watched him in a lot of big games. He makes a lot of turnover-worthy throws, and he has had some good fortune. And we've seen once in a while where it's come back to haunt him. But I can make the case that you put Brock Purdy in a slightly different situation where he's not surrounded by an almost perfect offensive situation, and he would be a starter, but we wouldn't be talking about him for the MVP.
But, I mean, isn't that so much of what being a good quarterback is the right situation as much as anything else? In Purdy's case, yes. Do I think there's 10 other quarterbacks you could put in that position and they would succeed and probably thrive? Absolutely. But, and Lamont says I've said Brock Purdy's overrated. He's a cute story like the Lions. It is a cute story, and he's a, how do I put it? He's kind of a poor man's Matt Schaub. In that, he can win games for you, but he's also, in this case, he's got so many weapons,
Right.
and that's what's really missing. Like when Debo's hurt, Debo and Trent Williams, I think, are the two key players on that entire offense, because Trent Williams is still one of the best tackles in football. And when Debo, they run those short screens to Debo, they run those short passes that are easy for Brock Purdy, that even Mafia Joe Spano could throw those passes, and he turns them into 20 gains. And
you're absolutely right.
And so that's why I'm kind of like, that's the key guy. And when he went out of the game, suddenly the 49ers weren't cranking on all cylinders like they were when he was in there. And as far as the Packers go, I don't know how much better Jordan Love's going to be. I don't know how much better he needs to be. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. He's not going to beat Brett Favre. But he's pretty good. And if he can kind of stay at this level, I think the Packers will be an interesting story moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we might be having a different discussion. We might be talking about an upset had he just stayed within himself on that last drive. What's the cardinal rule of football? Don't throw late across your body into the middle of the field. And he did that, and he had a turnover, and he forced things. They had time. Time was not an issue there. He didn't need to force that. Again, inexperienced quarterback mistake, you got to learn from it. But, getting back to the Brock Purdy thing, would it be fair to say, you made the Matt Schaub comparison, and that's a good one. Would it be fair to say that, unlike the Mahomeses and the Josh Allens and, name a handful of others, the 49ers don't necessarily win games because of Brock Purdy? They don't win despite him, but they don't necessarily win because of him. And so that kind of puts him, and again, this was the last player picked in the draft. So he's a great story, and he's certainly good enough to be a starting quarterback, and he's certainly in the upper half of the league amongst starting quarterbacks. I'm just making the case that he's not a truly elite quarterback. He's not on the level of Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, God, no.
Justin Herbert, guys of that ilk, and guys of that ilk. He's not there and won't ever get there.
Well, and, I watched a lot of Brock Purdy in college because I'm a Big 12 fan, right?
Yes.
This is what he's always been. He doesn't throw a lot of picks. He throws passes that, if the defender was ready for it, would have gotten picked. But he also had Breece Hall, who he just handed the ball off to 40 times a game. And he had a really good 6'5" receiver that he'd throw to. And that was it. And he was boring. He was effective because, and it's Iowa State. And everybody wants to, say their coach should get a better job and all. I mean, he gets the most out of Iowa State, but they're never sexy. They're never that good. And that's kind of Brock Purdy. And it's a good fit for this offense. But at some point, your quarterback, you have to ask him to win a game for you. And especially now that we're this late in. So now it's going to come down to, all right, let's say we get to a tight game. Who do we trust more to win the game for us? Brock Purdy or Jared Goff?
Right. And let's factor in Brock Purdy has to win the game for you without Debo, because Debo may not be able to go on Sunday. We don't know. It's too early to know. So that becomes the other question, whereas Jared Goff is going to have all his weapons. Now, there's the unique problem of Jared Goff outdoors on the road. It's not the Northeast or the Midwest, but, we've seen the splits over a half a decade of Jared Goff at home in a dome versus outside on the road, and they are alarming.
I mean, San Francisco, right? It's if it's the weather we had the other night, it'll be a factor. But it'll definitely be a factor. But I mean, he's also, he had a lot of success playing outdoors in LA, and if the weather's similar, I mean, it won't, because LA is always warmer. But I do think that is a factor, and I just don't know if Jared Goff is up for the moment yet. We'll find out. He was pretty good the other day, but I think the Buccaneers as much gave that away as the Lions won it.
I looked at that football game, and I thought the Lions staff outcoached the Buccaneers staff. All the halftime adjustments seemed to be made by the Lions. They were smart enough in the second half to lean on Jahmyr Gibbs in the running game and go to the outside running game. That opened everything up for them offensively. And then defensively, knowing that you have a weak secondary, particularly on the outside with those corners, and that the Buccaneers wide receivers are an absolute mismatch. They have an absolutely huge advantages. Being able, Aaron Glenn did a great job of scheming up to get those safeties to help those outside corners who were mismatched and got hit for a bunch of big plays in the first half. So that's where I really think the Lions took this game from the Buccaneers, or you could make the case the Buccaneers gave it to them. The Lions found all the adjustments to make at halftime, made some not so subtle scheme changes that absolutely worked, while Tampa Bay did what they always do. And when they couldn't hit Godwin and Mike Evans, their goose was cooked.
Yeah, and right before the half there, I thought they did a great job of saying, all right, we got Mike Evans one-on-one. What the fuck are we doing? We're just throwing the ball to him. And it worked.
Yeah.
But the thing I will say about this, the Lions offensively, they match up just fine. I mean, they've got a terrific rookie tight end. They've got a very good offensive line. Jahmyr Gibbs gets better every game. Good receivers on the outside, especially when they're healthy. But defensively, they're kind of bums. And that's where I think that, why Debo would be such an important part for the 49ers to have, because I think they would take advantage of that defense.
It's a good point. I mean, it makes it the kind of game that you hold off betting on. I'll tell you this: if you like the Lions, as I do, to keep it close, you wait until you hear on Debo, because if they deem that Debo's going to play, that number will move to the other side of 7. It'll probably get close. It's 6.5 now, depending on where you look. If they say Debo's going to play in some form or fashion, that number will shoot up to 7.5, maybe even 8.
Probably. I think he'll move it at least a point. I mean, that's probably point and a half.
Right.
Because usually non-quarterbacks don't move it that much, but I think and again, it just depends on, if you've really been watching this team, you see how important he is to them. And
right.
I think it's a point and a half. I do.
So it moves it 6, 7.5, 8, which gets you on the right side of key numbers. So if you like the Lions, as is often the case with underdogs in these spots, it pays to wait. Get on your favorites early, because the line's going to move against you, and you'll probably end up on the wrong side of a key number, and wait on your underdogs till late, because you'll probably get yourself to the right side of a key number.
So how often so we're down to 4 games, right? And I know everybody wants to bet all 4 because we don't have much left. It's like Monday Night Football, right? Everybody wants to bet it. How often do you look at the early lines and jump in? And Lamont says the NFL did not want the Lions in the Super Bowl. That would be a revenue slaughter. I agree, but it's just like Buffalo. You remember, though, they didn't want Kansas City for the longest time, and now look at what the Chiefs are. Now they got now you've got Travis Swift with his husband, and you've got all this stuff going on with the Chiefs that brings in viewers. I mean, you know,
Yeah, and if you juxtapose
juxtapose.
yeah, exactly. You know what I meant. If you put the Lions against either the Ravens or the Chiefs as that great story, I think you got something. And I understand what everybody's saying. Nobody wants to see the Lions in the Super Bowls. It's ratings death. But now you've got a team that's becoming kind of a darling in many ways because they've never been to a Super Bowl, and the Lions have been a laughing stock of the NFL for the most part since the early 60s. So if you get one of these transcendent teams that always does well with ratings, and now you put some sort of great Cinderella story in there to go with it, I think you might have something terrific. And I think you might actually end up with great ratings. And I don't think it would be a step back necessarily, or at least a major one from, say, the 49ers against either the Chiefs or the Ravens. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind, Super Bowl ratings are not football fans necessarily, right? I mean,
Right.
we're all gonna be watching, but if Travis Swift's husband is on the sidelines there, everybody's gonna watch that game that doesn't care about football. And
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, in her little booth. I mean, she's too precious to go to the sideline. But I mean, the camera will be on her 150 times. That will be what brings you ratings, and beyond what you usually get. And it could be the most watched Super Bowl just because of her.
Could be.
But I mean, I think in general, you're always going to have great ratings for the Super Bowl because every football fan watches, right? I'm going to watch. I mean, I kind of wanted Lions Bills, which we'll get to the Bills game here in a second, and because I thought that would have been fun to see somebody win it for the first time, because as much as I like in college football, I'm definitely a capitalist. I want the big teams to win, and I want to see Georgia, Alabama again. I want to see Michigan and Alabama. I mean, that's what I want to see. NFL, it says Detroit's a huge market. It's a bigger market than people realize. I'll say that. Plus, they've also got a huge fan base in that part of Canada and Windsor and all that. But the reality is, it's just there are teams that are sexy. If the Cowboys are in the Super Bowl, it doesn't matter who they play, right? It's going to be through the. When the Patriots were in the Super Bowl, it didn't matter who they played. That's what ratings. I don't know if the NFL cares because they're already making so much damn money. Like, just off that Paramount streaming thing they did. I mean, they could have bought 10 small children with that money. It's crazy.
At least. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And again, if you get one of these teams that draws regardless and gives that bump, the Lions can be painted as a great underdog story. So you'll have all the things that fit together, and the NFL will be just fine. They crank out money. I should probably double back and answer a question. You'd kind of asked about me and early lines. I always look at early lines. A lot of times it depends on if I pounce on who I like, what side of a key number they're on, and what the injury report looks like. If you're on the Lions, I'm sorry. If you're on the Lions, I think you're waiting because you want to get on the right side of a key number. So you're waiting on the Debo question. Otherwise, you may have to buy that point. If you're on the Chiefs, you might be moving now because they're on the right side of a key number. They're 3.5. They're plus 3.5. So I don't know that. And if you look at the early movement on that line, not so much the actual movement, but you look at, say, you go to Pinnacle and you look at the price next to that line. It's plus 3.5 at minus 115, or it looks like it's headed to pulling back towards +3 or +2.5. So I think if you like the Chiefs, even though you have some questions injury-wise on defense that you're not going to have answers to, if you like the Chiefs, I think you got to jump now. So a lot of times I always look at early lines, but it really depends on situations as far as who I like, where the key numbers are, the injury report, and where I expect the line to move before I push early or push late. But in general, a lot of times I find if you're on a favorite, you probably have to move early. And if you're on an underdog, you could probably afford to move late because that favorite will probably get some late steam that'll get you on the right side of a number.
Yeah, it's funny because BC was texting me this morning about a hockey play tonight, and I told him I can't make the play until I see the morning skate, so I know who the goalie's going to be, and a lot of the numbers on the props don't pop up until 3 hours before game time.
Right.
So, yeah, but I'm getting 6, and it's like, well, if you want the 6, take it now. But I'm not here to tell you that I'm confident in that because I have to see the morning skate. It's the same thing, It's like you have to have as much information as you can get, and and I think this is the same thing in a lot of ways. And I never played early back in the day, and now I do when I find something I like. But
right. And with hockey and the NBA are kind of those same challenges, those daily sports. The NBA, you have those same challenges because, you'll look, and if you look at NBA projected lineups, there's a ton of game time decisions every day. So while you want to move to preserve line value, you're looking, if you move too early, like in hockey, you got to wait until the morning skate, see who the goalie is. Who's between the pipes changes everything, because you might jump to get early, the benefit of early line value, but then something always has a way in an NBA game of popping up on the injury report. Like if you like the big number with the Timberwolves today and thought you had to pounce because of that number, well, guess what happens? Anthony Edwards just showed up on the injury report after the shoot around because he's not feeling well. The Minnesota Timberwolves without Anthony Edwards are a far different team than they are with him. Definitely worth a couple of points. So, and hockey, the NBA and NHL hockey, it's hard to pounce too early. Those are kind of weight sports, and sometimes you may have to give up a little line value to get some certainty into who's actually trotting out there.
Well, and so much of what I do is totals, and so much of that is relying on the goalkeeper. And, because there are some teams that I know are going to get 3.5 goals a game that I can trust. But if they go up against somebody who's, got a 2.70 GAA in the last 5 games, I don't want to make that play because, goalies do get hot. But, I didn't mean to spin it into hockey, but it's just one of those. To get as much information as I can before I make my play. B. Hannon says, no one is looking forward to Usher during the halftime show. You know what? And you guys are going to laugh at me for this. I'm sure I've heard Usher songs when I've been out and about. I couldn't tell you one Usher song. And I don't pay any attention to the halftime show. I really don't. I think it's the last one that I truly enjoyed was when we're going way back now, way back in my day, right after 9/11, I went to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and that was the Patriots beating the Rams. And U2, which I don't like U2, I really don't, but they did the halftime show, and they did a tribute to what happened on 9/11, and it was transcendent. It really was. It was one of those things where I just said, okay, I never need to see another halftime show, because even the words had different meanings. Because they did it. I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and they were just like listing all the names, and it was chilling, man. And
that's powerful.
Yeah,
Powerful.
yeah. And so since then, I'm kind of so I don't really pay any attention to the halftime shows, and I know I should because it's pop culture. And I did like the one with Katy Perry. I thought that was kind of cool, where she had the lions and shit. And
Well,
but
didn't the
otherwise,
shark make himself? The dancing shark became the big
yeah, it was
star out of that. Left
yeah,
shark,
what?
right shark. I don't know.
Yeah,
Land
yeah,
shark,
yeah,
grounded shark,
yeah.
whichever one.
Right-handed shark. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Uh, all right.
You know what I do at halftime if I'm at home? If I'm at home and there's even people, I walk the dogs. I get a nice long halftime. I give the dogs a good walk and not miss any of the game.
Yeah, you know what? That's probably true. Although I didn't have Kira this year, so this will be her first Super Bowl. But
You'll walk her at halftime, guaranteed.
well, we'll probably walk her over to PJ's and watch the game there, and and I'll take her for a walk then because she loves being on that patio as long as the weather's not horrible.
Yeah.
And everybody loves her because she's
New Yorkers don't watch the Super Bowl outside, Fred.
well.
It's in February. I hate sitting outside.
Yeah, well, I live on the face of the sun, and right now the weather's actually. I mean, we were like in the 30s for like a week, like for a high, and now it's raining like crazy. So I don't know what's going to happen. But all right, I want you to break down Bills Chiefs a little bit while I go and reload my drink, but I will be listening. So
Okay,
take it away.
awesome. Bills Chiefs. This was basically a heavyweight championship match. This was two teams landing counterpunch after counterpunch after counterpunch, and then for every mistake one team made, the other team came back and countered with a mistake of their own. You make the decision to go for it on fourth down in your own territory way too soon, and it looks like you gave the game away. And then the Chiefs give it away with a fumble on the 1 yard line through the end zone, touchback, no harm, no foul. It was just a tremendous, tremendous football game. And again, the key here in this game was another case of halftime adjustments. The
Right.
Chiefs did a better job of making halftime adjustments. The Bills, in many ways, dominated the first half of that game with their running attack, both James Cook and Josh Allen. In the second half, the Chiefs saw that they had started to get some things going with the running game and Isaiah Pacheco in the first half. They leaned on it a lot more in the second half. They made adjustments defensively, slowed down the Bills' running game in the second half, made them one-dimensional, brought a little more heat, and that was the story of this heavyweight fight. It was, again, and we see it in boxing matches, where a fighter makes an in-fight strategy adjustment as far as changing distance, changing angles, going from being the guy who gets off first to maybe counter punching. And you kind of saw that here again, like in the Lions game. I thought the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo did a better job with the halftime adjustments. Their halftime adjustments were more impactful, more successful. And in many ways, to me, that was a difference in this football game.
All right, I'm gonna give you my thoughts on this in a second, but first I want to tell you about Piper's Plumbing. My guy Joseph, he does a great job. 832-632-2583. And he and his wife Marie are just terrific people. And you know what? Plumbers, we guys, all of us have dealt with them, right? And sometimes you get guys that are just all about themselves. And they don't care, they don't put in the effort. Well, that's not Piper's. 832-632-2583. They want you to be satisfied with their work. They're going to work their ass off for you, and they're good people. And it doesn't matter what you need, right? Whether it's, plumbing or water heater replacement. I mean, everybody needs something. Give them a call, because if your drain's clogged or blocked, any of that, if you've got commercial work for them, please just tell them that you heard about it on the Falconcast. 832-632-2583. I think I really wanted to see the Bills win this for a lot of reasons. But I think in the end, the injuries on defense wound up being too much for them. They were down to third and fourth string guys at a lot of key positions. which you can't really do against the Chiefs. And I don't think this is a sexy Chiefs team other than, Travis Swift's husband. But yeah, but otherwise they're just not that sexy. And I don't think they're going to go in and beat the Ravens unless the Ravens play their worst game.
Well, and I'll tell you one of the keys, because I thought that the Bills did a poor job of taking advantage of this in the second half. Willie Gay, who was the spy for the Chiefs, got hurt in this game, and he was gone. He re-aggravated that neck injury, and we didn't see him most of this game. And the Chiefs' defense was built around William Gay spying on Josh Allen. And he goes out, and Josh Allen's taking advantage of it. James Cook is taking advantage as a result, and they're running the ball down the Chiefs' throat. Yeah. They got away from it in the second half where the Chiefs adjusted. We'll give credit both ways. So, it's interesting. And, you talk about William Gay. I think he's going to be so important. If he's able to play for the Chiefs, that'll help them a lot, because that spiral that he had against Josh Allen, he's going to have against Lamar Jackson. And without that, yes, they'll have a week to plan for a different way, but I don't know that they really have another way. Amongst the players on that defense, Willie Gay has always been their spy. They don't have anybody else to really play that role. And when he went out of the game, it showed the first half of that Bills game.
All right, Joe. Hey, listen, man, I appreciate you jumping in on short notice today, but I got to get to Lawyer Dave here before I run out of time. But great stuff as always, and I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, man.
Lawyer Dave.
Hey, Fred, how are you, my brother?
I'm just living someone else's dream right now, so it's all good.
What's her name?
No, we'll talk about that off air. I'm not doing that. I haven't talked to you since Michigan won, man.
I know. How about the big blue coming through in the clutch?
I mean, you still got to be walking around with a Woody over that.
I am. And as a matter of fact, I got my championship shirts Saturday. Nice. So I wore one to watch the Texans playoff game underneath my J.J. Watt shirt, and did my best to pull, but wasn't quite enough.
Well, before I want to ask you a couple sports questions, and I don't know how much time I have left, so tell them about the firm first.
Well, we're personal injury lawyers. We help people that get hurt in any kind of way, any place. We've had cases from West Coast to East Coast, Canada to South America. So if you get hurt, we're going to come back to your Indian accent here in a minute, Fred. So if you have any kind of an accident at all, refinery accident, car wreck, truck wreck, slip and fall, medical malpractice, I'll even look at those if they're serious enough. Give me a call, Lawyer Dave at 713-626-8900.
All right. No, I was so happy for you when Michigan won. I think I told you.
Thank you.
It was cool to watch. I got a bunch of Lions friends now too that I'm rooting for.
I'm a Lions fan as well. I mean, I grew up in Michigan. I've just been down here 45 years, so I'm definitely a Texans fan and a Cowboy hater. But I'd love to see the Lions do it if the Texans couldn't.
Yeah, and you know what? It was a good season, but I don't want to pat them on the head because. I'm not one of those trophy for everybody guys. It's like, hey, you get to that point, you need to compete. You need to have a chance. They ran into the best team in football. I think the Ravens are winning the whole thing. But
oops, that must have been it.
I think it was a great college football season. I don't know what's going to happen. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, I take the Chargers job.
He's gone. I thought he was going to take the Raiders job. But apparently the Chargers offered him $16 million a year, for criminy sake, for 5 years, $90 million. Holy Christmas! Even you'd go for that.
I could be half as good at that as good as him.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take half.
I've heard you could be had for a lot less.
Yeah, but I live in the Montrose. Don't start those rumors. Anyway. Anyway, brother, man, love to get together soon. And like I said, I've been celebrating your win, and very
Thank
very
you.
proud of you guys. And I'll talk to you soon. Lots for us to catch up on at some point.
Much love to you, Fred, and go blue, baby. Go blue.
All right, brother. Okay, guys, that is going to wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I love all you guys, man. You add so much to the show. And, we'll be back on Thursday with AJ Hoffman. And, hopefully I can tell you a little bit about this new job I had to take. So it's very weird. You guys will make fun of me for it, but hey. All right. Until Thursday, stay sportsy. Gulf Coast Badasses.